your awareness of, what you noticed about me and what you pick up with what I say. And I don't know, there's something about it that is helpful. Kind of, I guess, how I wanted to support others as well in terms of listening. You kind of already do that, but then you have the ability to share knowledge that's very precise and helpful in that way.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well that's helpful because I haven't done many. I turned off the website because I wasn't doing many Skype sessions because I mentioned it a little bit before. Like, I guess there's this cliche I have in my head about how I'm supposed to be like some motherly, nurturing, like I'm here for you,
Yeah,
type thing. But like, especially when I when someone like you, when I speak with someone like you, you're mature. So I guess it depends on who I'm speaking to, of course.
yes,
But there's no reason to kind of like cry about stuff.
yeah,
I don't mean that there's nothing to cry about, but what I mean is like there's nothing for me to cry about. So it's not that like I don't feel your pain, but I'm not here to feel your pain.
yeah.
Do you understand?
I
Because if
do. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, so you don't have to be feeling what I'm feeling to help, but you can hear, and also you have experienced what you've experienced, and you've learned what you've learned. So then you're able to pick up from that and apply what you're able to help with. So you don't have to be feeling it or feeling the pain, but you're able to apply what you've learned because you want to help. That's all you want to do. Which is, this is already a good way to start this recording, because then the next thing I wanted to ask is then what made you want to start the YouTube channel and then touch on these topics?
It was like a year maybe, and like 2 months ago, I saw Infinite Waters. Do you know who Infinite?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's like some self-help guru. And then I saw a smaller channel called Vesuvius.
Okay.
And he was this kid. Now his channel is called Uplifting Humanity. And he's kind of more of this like motherly, nurturing, very soft type, which resonates more with who I was a little bit before. But he was just this kid, kind of like I am. He was this kid talking about just what he knew about esoteric stuff and about emotional blockades or whatever. And just seeing him speak kind of taught me that, if he can do it, anybody can do it. So I just turned on my camera for the first time and recorded. I talked about like not listening to people better. Don't just wait for your turn to speak, but actually listen to people. So that was the first video.
That's an interesting one as a first video as well, because it's the first time you've got the camera pointing at you and you're speaking. Mm-hmm. And to then have that as a subject of listening more, that's kind of interesting. A nice paradox, isn't it?
Yeah, I never noticed that.
What was it like sitting there in front of the camera for the first time?
Well, the first time, my first two videos are quite awkward because I don't know how to present myself, and I think I ought to present myself in a certain way. So I'm kind of like trying to be extra slow and I'm trying to be like Infinite Waters, basically.
But I guess that really helps the connection as well. I mean, one of the problems I've had with broadcasting or, being on the radio is, which has taken me years of doing it, and I'm slowly getting there. One thing that helps recently is doing a little bit of public speaking and getting some feedback about it. But I've had a tendency in the past of speaking too quickly, especially when I get excited. And this comes back to speaking to girls as well. Often when I speak to them, I get caught up in the beautiful girl spell and want to say too much at once. And that can trip things up a bit. And to be able to slow down, such as yourself, does help quite a lot.
Yeah, well, I always have to remember to breathe all the time. And I think one reason men get carried away with speaking is because we're so able to analyze things and so willing to look deeper and deconstruct. It's like one thought just leads to another thought, leads to another thought.
Yes. Yeah, the spiral. And just one trick as well that I guess one thing that's put me off, like having onto camera YouTube bits, even though it's something that I'd like to explore, is this feeling of, a kind of a vanity thing, but it's just one thing that you do really well at is you have your humbleness with it as well. So you're on camera and expressing what you want to express, and you're humble with it. So you kind of you bridge that, or you have that walk that fine line really well, I think. And I guess I'd get self-conscious of what people think of me perhaps too much.
Yeah, well, maybe a trick that I pull is nobody knows my name. There's no personal, nothing is about me on my channel, and this is kind of like it's like in honor of the idea that like we don't get really to decide who we are. So like whether you love yourself or hate yourself, you didn't really get to choose these things about you that you now have to deal with. And so if I'm like whether you're an athlete or whether you're a teacher or whether you're a radio show host, you didn't like choose to be guided in this direction. So maybe it doesn't matter what people think because they have no idea who I am. But at the same time, they have a good idea of who I am. So I suppose kind of externalizing or objectifying myself in the way that like, yes, I am a person, but I'm also kind of just like a puppet of the source of creation, whatever you want to call it. That kind of makes it easy to deal with messages coming my way.
Yes, being open to the topics and thoughts as they come through. That helps with the pace of your speaking as well. That allows for the ideas to come through, because I think you've mentioned before how you don't write things down 100%. You just allow it to flow.
Yeah, it's much easier said than done because you don't know how much is flowing. Well, I guess you get a feel for it as time moves on. You don't know how much is flowing naturally, and you don't know how much you're manipulating. But the more tension that you feel, the more you're manipulating. So that's when I have to remember to breathe or slow down.
Yeah. And I guess what attracted me to your channel was just all the different topics you cover, which, as I said before, is resonant with the topics I want to cover on the Mental Health Matters podcast, because of these different things are involved with how we feel. So the things about, a little bit about relationships, but also the environmental reasons, nutrition, especially with talking about raw meat, how we're in some, living lives that we're not 100% resonant with our mission, how we're pulled off course, and then also finding the path a little bit as well. So these are all things I've been trying to learn about myself. And, you're finding topics and talking about them. Mm-hmm. So are all these things you've experienced yourself? What kind of has, what am I trying to ask about, the different topics and how you kind of find them for each video? Or all these things you touched on and experienced yourself?
Yeah, well, the journey continues. So it's like we spoke about before this. If you're not kind of fully dedicated to your sacrifice or whatever, these are big words that I'm using. Makes it sound so romantic. If you're not pushing yourself, if you're not what David Deida calls living at your edge, then kind of the luster of life disappears. And so the only reason I'm able to continue speaking about things, and the only reason new things keep coming up for me, is because I'm kind of pushing myself. So I'll go through down moments where I don't know what to talk about, but as soon as I start living again, I don't know what it is about me. I don't think, knowing yourself is kind of one of the hardest things to do. But something is like, I'm very relatable or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what word, but I can articulate things that other people are thinking, or maybe I don't know. I don't really know what it is. Sorry.
Yeah, but again, I can just touch on what brought me to get in touch was, the relatability of the topics, and that thing about you have got that empathy and warmness to, and make it comfortable to connect. So, at the end of those videos where you said to get in touch on Skype. So it didn't sound anything structured, like there would be kind of structured therapy sessions, for example. But
Mm.
from what you talked about in the video, it kind of you naturally want to get in touch to see, maybe you can help in some way. But then even just to talk about my perspective of even what you talked about in that video would help somehow. So there's something about, just by talking and to articulate things like you mentioned before. But
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is kind of we maybe as a society, maybe not you and I, because here we are articulating so much, but as a whole, people kind of they neglect, and this goes back to us kind of forgetting our animal nature. So we're all a part of a collective spiritually. Our consciousness comes from, the same source or whatever. But also physically, as physical bodies, because our bodies are animals, we're also a part of kind of the animal kingdom collective, which is a part naturally of the nature collective. So anyway, what I'm trying to bridge to is articulation happens on the outside of your brain, and emotions happen on the inside of your brain. So what happens when you speak about feelings, and this is why they're hard to talk about, because they happen in a more basic part of your brain. When you speak about them, you're kind of like massaging them to the outside of your brain.
yeah,
And that's where they can be relaxed. That's where they can be understood and released.
it kind of reminds me of how it's difficult to analyze and think through your problems, because often they're caused by a different part of you. Like, it feels like our feelings are different to the emotions somehow, or that like I was speaking to a friend last night who said who reminded me of the quote, you can't fix a problem with the same way of thinking or frequency of what created it. So you can't, sometimes you can't think through things that you're feeling, because it's almost like they're completely different systems. But having said that, there's something about poetry, or there's something about expression, or especially in music, that does help somehow. So there is something in a frequency of expression that does, or is able to describe things.
Absolutely. We were given this this ability to intellectualize things, and I suppose we ought to use it. So that's where you get things like poetry or music. It's just like articulating emotions.
So is there something in the connections you wanted to have to people, or I think I touched on this before, what were you kind of looking to do? Do you want to expand on this, what you're doing, or to connect with people? So when you connect with them on Skype, for example, do you want to be helping people more and more?
Yeah, the one-on-one thing, it's hard to get into because it's so specific, and my shtick is kind of that none of these things that we're going through are specific, so they're not personal, and so hopefully I just continue until I can kind of speak to small groups, and then you don't know where it's going to go from there. But yeah, hopefully I can just open up, keep opening it and opening it.
Well, I'm sure that's naturally going to happen with the videos, but it's interesting when you said about how specific and personal things can be, but isn't it interesting how we all know what each other's talking about when we talk
Absolutely.
about a problem? All the subjects in your videos, it's like, we can all relate to something that someone's going through, which comes back to that connection we all have.
Yeah, it's kind of disgusting how much emphasis we place on our individuality. And this is something that occurs much more in the Western world, this idea that that we are individuals, and of course we are individuated from one another. But there's far too much emphasis on us being individual, which causes us to isolate ourselves because we don't see each other as members of the same species, let alone, in other aspects of some spiritual collective. So then we think everything is, all our problems are for us, and and it's simply not like that.
Yeah. Yeah, we're being atomized from each other, from families, men and women, like we talked about a bit, but also from nature. Christy O.G., who I spoke to last time, said, why is it in the language we talk about visiting nature or going back to nature, whereas we are actually part of nature all the time?
Absolutely.
And we're being distanced from it, with our diet, this whole issue around, veganism, which I got caught up in, but, now making sure that, I'm eating more meat because that feels more natural as well.
Yeah, nowadays when I eat something like plants, or I eat something that's very processed or cooked, I get bad reaction.
Yeah. So you noticed it from trial and error within yourself, because you speak in your videos about how you have been vegetarian before.
Yeah, I was vegan for a little bit over a year, high carb, low fat. And now I'm a high-fat, low-carb, raw animal product person.
Yeah, I'm looking into that as well. Yeah, and you kind of feel the differences. And I heard this wonderful description before how, there's a reason why animal fats taste good, because we're supposed to have them. The same way that sex feels good because we're supposed to be reproducing, and it's a way for us to reproduce.
Funny way of looking at it, and also. The humbling aspect of eating kind of raw animal products, because what vegans commonly say is that people eat meat because it tastes good.
Yeah.
But raw meat doesn't taste good. It tastes fine. Milk is good. I really love milk. That's because it has some sugar in it. But it's really humbling because you no longer have taste as kind of a crutch. Your food no longer gives you this fleeting pleasure that you can cover up your emotions with. And that's also an interesting part of, vegans think they're becoming more humble because they're only eating plants, but for some reason it seems like the vegans are they have the biggest egos. They're the most I'm doing the right thing and you need to do this, but it's this animal sacrifice that's been ingrained in nature. All animals die, and they're all getting eaten by, all the plants die, and even a rose has thorns, so it's trying to defend itself.
Yeah.
So everything knows what's going on here, and getting back to this, this is like living on the land or whatever. I'm obviously not killing the cows that I'm eating. But the idea that you just kill an animal and eat it, directly for food, that really brings you back down to earth.
Yes, and it's got us here in the first place, which makes me wonder, this kind of can lead on to some conspiracy thinking, because if you think about all the things that are dividing us from ourselves and from nature, is a path we're being led down. We're being kind of separated from, men and women not talking to each other. Is there a depopulation thing behind that, and with then eating food that's not natural to us? So it's trying to find the source of what's going on there.
Yeah, well, we have to remember how dumb each of us are, because we are pretty dumb. So we've been taught that we're so smart and we're so special, and humans aren't like the other beasts, and humans are God's gift to creation, and so on and so forth. But we are kind of these limited mammalian creatures, and so we easily fall for these tricks. So you can look at it kind of, if we speak about just veganism, you can look at it as it's being pushed on us, but you could also look at it as we're all asking for it. That's what everybody's asking for. They're asking for more kale and more fresh foods and more local grown plants, and of course they're happy to give it to us because it's cheaper. We ask for new TV shows, so of course they're happy to give it to us. We ask for fast food, so of course they're happy to give it to us.
But there's also can be some social engineering done to change our behavior. Wasn't it Britt Bernays that said that? To change what the public wants, because before we wanted products that lasted. but then they changed they changed the public's perception or mind to wanting the new thing. So that can go on as well.
I heard Terence McKenna speak on this subject, and it's I suppose it's a result of everybody wanting to be rich in the Western world. Because in order to have these kind of cheap manufactured, abundant material objects, in order to have this wealth, this material wealth, there has to be some part of the world that's working for pennies to produce it.
Yeah.
So, we get to buy the car and we feel rich to have it, but the only reason it's accessible to us is because somebody made it for $1,000 or something like that. Poor example. The car is a poor example, but anything made out of plastic, like an iPhone. The people making iPhones are literally like trying to commit suicide because they're working in such poor conditions. But it makes us rich. So it makes us feel rich over here. So.
Yeah, this actually made me think a bit because, again, coming back to mental health a bit, our perceptions here and what we're trying to do with helping people here is something completely different to, say, someone living in China or Bangladesh. What are they doing in their communities? Do they have their own Bangladeshi YouTube of people talking about completely different things about how people can get by and be more happy in their lives? The circumstances around them is something completely different, isn't it? So there's something that happening in different parts of the world. The reality is completely different for people. Is it only that we've got to this point in the West and over the past decades of how things have moved that has brought us to here, that this are sort of more disconnected with life and the reality of things makes us wonder more.
Yeah, well, it's definitely up to the individual to cut through the BS. I suppose when ignorance is kind of dangerous, and when you're young, you kind of don't know, but it's kind of everybody's obligation to find out for themselves, what's different and how have we become disconnected.
Yeah, it's a big old subject.
Yeah, you're right.
Especially in schools, and then how much are kids being aware or made aware of what's going on?
Yeah, I don't think. The school system is pretty outdated when it. I don't want to get too off topic. I don't know if we're getting too off topic.
Not really, because that kind of brings me a little bit and then into sort of back to where you are in your life and here. Is it, are there things that you learned from school or what you're studying now which relate to what you're doing and want to move forward with?
No. Not at all. School was pretty tough for me. I just recently graduated with a bachelor's in English. And that was also tough for me. That was kind of a familial obligation to graduate from college. I don't think it's not that they're not teaching you what you should be learning. It's that that's not what it's there for. It's not there to learn how to eat properly. It's not there to learn how to sleep properly or breathe more. This is something that hopefully the culture that you're raised in, or hopefully the family that you're raised in, is in touch with themselves enough that they could teach you how to sleep or how to eat or something like that. But it's funny because we're blaming, people are so quick to point their fingers at education, but it's kind of like, it's kind of all of our faults. We're so disconnected, and then we expect to send our children to a building where they learn stuff that we don't even know. Yeah,
and then this whole thing about parents not being able to teach their kids about sexual education or even financial things. The whole way of what to do with money is the kids leaving school, even university, with no idea about the value of money or what to do with it.
Yeah, I think it's the value of money. How valuable money is. I think kids don't realize that because they don't see what they could put their money into that will get value out. And I think it was a very famous saying that, like, you are your greatest investment. But when we're raised in a way that we don't we're not very aware of our own quirks. We're not aware of what makes us actually individuals and what makes us unique. When we're not when we don't know our strengths and weaknesses and that we have to do something for the world, then we're not going to invest our money smartly. We're just going to try to stay distracted while we're here.
Yes, because a lot of that does come down to consumerism and just spending money to have the thing or to feel good with shopping and whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah, that side of it definitely brings us more disconnected with nature.
Yeah, and much more disconnected with ourselves. You were speaking earlier about how things have been pointing you, back towards yourself.
Yeah.
And this is also, your alone time or your connection with yourself. This is the greatest connection. I think I'm going to make a video, because I was just reminded about it, about how we seem to crave social validation. We seem to crave emotional validation from other people, but really it's an externalization of craving ourselves. Because nobody can kind of give you the fulfillment that no one can fulfill yourself, because you are yourself. So
yeah, you reminded me of a big thing I've been looking into recently. Part of this time spending with myself is to do better at how I treat myself. I'm trying to remember that expression, being your own best friend. And someone recently told me about the book What to Say to Yourself When You Talk to Yourself by Shad Helmstetter. And even that's made a big difference, because we're kind of better at being, like what we're talking about, being empathic, or better when we're speaking to other people, but we do that better than we do to ourselves sometimes.
Absolutely. Especially kind of with the New Age movement, when you get caught up in the New Age movement, especially when we're taught that our ego is useless and it is to be destroyed.
Yeah.
And we are simply only a part of a collective. Then you're just well, fuck myself then. I don't have to eat. I can become a breatharian and I can just help everybody except for myself. But it doesn't quite work like that. The way I kind of articulate kind of like our broad journey here is like we're like a pencil, and we have limited graphite or we have limited lead, and so our purpose is supposed to write ourselves out of existence.
Yeah.
To keep writing until the story is done, and then the pencil, we have to keep sharpening ourselves, keep sharpening the pencil until the pencil is gone. But this also requires that we rest our hand, so we have the energy to write ourselves out of existence. So by writing, you are contributing to the collective. But if you only focus on contributing to the collective, you're going to get a cramp or something. So you need to sleep and you need to massage your hand. You need to keep yourself in the game if you're going to play it.
Yeah, we can forget that, and we're kind of taught as well to be productive all the time, and almost it sees now like having some rest, you feel like you're doing something wrong. Oh, I'm not being, I'm not doing enough at the moment.
Absolutely. That's a dangerous mindset.
Yeah. This comes back to some of the self-help stuff as well. How much of this part of the self-help industry is also that, what do they call it? The kind of entrepreneurial advice, some aspects as well, like the kind of Tony Robbins perspective of like really trying to find that best part of you to become, make all those millions or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, we're all entrepreneurs. It's not that we're not all entrepreneurs, but it's so much easier said than done.
Yeah.
And this is kind of something that the whole Western world, I don't know, we must be going through maybe some like the age of Aquarius or whatever. But there's this uber concern about entrepreneurialism, right? That's the capitalism aspect. And then there's the create your own reality. That's the new age aspect.
Yep.
The reprogram your subconscious, attract what you want. We're taught that we're like these magical beings or whatever. We can just make all money at the snap of our fingers, and we can just think about what we want and it'll come our way. But then they sell so much. The law of attraction sells so much because it's so appealing on the surface to people who maybe they aren't experienced enough. I don't really know what it is, but absolutely, you don't just think about something and it comes to you. If anything, the way the law of attraction works is when you think about things, you're giving yourself a message. You're kind of telling your body what to do, and you're telling your mind what to move towards. So it's no coincidence that what you constantly think about or what you focus on, there's no coincidence that you achieve it, because your body is like a navigation system, and if you're constantly inputting directions, it's going to follow the directions.
Yeah, that reminds me of one of your videos that actually I posted the audio in a previous episode, is the illusions in your life.
Huh.
About how your body is telling you, and and life around you is telling you.
I need to rewatch that one. That's a lesson I forget.
Yeah, there's I guess that's why I kept having those lessons that I was having regrets about, is because if you don't remember them in those moments, then at least life keeps showing you until you do remember it, and then move past it.
I think that's also something that's touched upon in the way of the superior man. I mentioned it earlier. It's called living at your edge.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're not staying true to like your most recent, deepest epiphanies, you're failing in some way.
Yeah. Or like the mediocre side of things by just skipping over and jumping on to the next thing.
Absolutely.
So are you optimistic with how people are that we're going to get through this?
I am optimistic about myself. I'm also optimistic about people who will be listening to this, and people who find my videos because it signifies that they want to stay in the game.
Yeah.
They want to succeed. I don't know if I'm optimistic about the majority of people. They're kind of along for the ride wherever the successful people take it, because kind of the people who have all the power in the world, they're kind of deciding reality for the feeble-minded people. So
that's natural then that, the rest would go along for the ride.
Yeah, I don't know where they're going though, but it doesn't concern me. Doesn't bother me.
I guess, but that's why it's good that your channel is around, for example, because I came across it. And so if you are willing to keep learning and you want to do better, the resources are out there and they're more and more easily available.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, you are your most valuable resource. And that's how, it's not that I don't feel for other people, but I know how, at least to some degree, because I'm only myself, but I know that life gets really tough sometimes. And I've wanted to kill myself, even fairly recently. It's people who are depressed, people who consider suicide, they're not getting anything wrong.
Yeah.
Dying would be much easier. It is much easier than actually toughing it out and seeing kind of where you go and where history is going. It would be much easier just to go to sleep forever.
Yeah, for sure.
But we're not here to kind of give up. We're not here to go to sleep forever. That's why, we all do someday. But as long as you're alive, you still kind of you're obligated to continue moving forward. So there's no pity party to be had, and I need to speak to myself on this one because I've felt bad for myself, in very large amounts. I've felt self-pity, and that's one of the worst things you could do is just feel bad for yourself.
Yeah, I've done that a lot. Partly why, I got in touch, but I'm glad the resonance was there and that you were putting these messages out there and you had that. And it's nice that you also had those videos where you put the opportunity out there to say, look, if you want to get in touch, because you're experimenting with how you want to move it forward and talking to people. That's a good thing to be trying. Yeah,
you never know where you're going to go, but you just got to go with, you just got to keep pushing forward, whatever is available to you.
Yeah.
Those are your only options, whatever you have. What else are you going to do?
Yeah, stagnating.
Yeah, and this goes back to what we were talking about before, about how we kind of don't have a choice about who we are. And this also connects to the kind of Western entrepreneurial thing and the kind of law of attraction thing, where not only are we taught that we can have anything that we want, but we're taught that we can become anybody we want. And it's not that we can't become anybody we want, but we're fairly limited in different capacities, right? Like some of us were trained in martial arts since we were children. So they have a chance at becoming a boxer or a fighter. Someone who's never picked up boxing gloves, you can't just become a boxer. If you're not good at math, you can't just become a rocket scientist. So you can't have whatever you want. You can have whatever you want based on your limitations, based on your natural abilities and based on your inclinations. You don't even get to decide what you like, what type of women you like. For all the people who like women out there, you don't get to decide if you're attracted to this woman or that woman. You just are.
Yeah.
And so there's this illusion that we have control, and I don't know how much control we have, but I know it's not as much as we consider.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, that somehow there's this kind of guiding energy and we're all in the flow of it. And you can feel when you're in the flow of life or when you're working against it to try and, either strike your own way or doing what you think you should be doing. But there is an actual flow to it.
Absolutely. And when you're doing something that doesn't kind of embody your true purpose or whatever word you want to use, you're going to feel it. But so then you don't have a choice. Then you're forced kind of to do what you were meant to do. I just heard a quote yesterday by Carl Jung, and he was talking about fate. And he says, fate is choosing to do what you must do, or something like that.
Yeah.
So life is just kind of surrendering to who you are, like objectifying yourself, trying to see who you are kind of from a third-party perspective and catering to that person.
That's a good trick. I guess I've taken steps and tried different things to find what made me happy doing.
Yeah. Well, everybody does, and we ought to be more encouraged to do that. One thing I've found with the people who watch my videos and myself is that we forget what brings us joy, and we forget how to have fun. And children know what they like. They don't think twice about it. They just kind of act on who they are naturally. Yeah. But as we get older, I don't know, there's many factors contributing to our downfall. But
everything gets so serious, doesn't it?
Everything gets so serious. That's a big point you just made.
Yeah, we're supposed to take things so seriously. Oh, we got to plan this. We got to do this for our future. We got to do this or that. But then all the fun goes out of it. Yeah,
and this also. You're right. I can't stick around people who are too serious. Though I definitely have a degree of seriousness about me, and I see it when I'm with people who are even less or even more carefree than I am. I kind of have to like humble myself. And we spoke about kind of the psychiatry thing, the going to a psychiatrist to help with mental health.
Yeah.
And part of maybe the unappeal, because I've self-diagnosed borderline personality disorder and so on and so forth. But you don't want to take yourself so seriously. It's like your problems, the things that you consider problems, they're just not as serious as you think. It's easy to say this, but Terence McKenna talks a lot about this because a long time ago, and in some cultures that haven't modernized, children who are born visionaries are praised. And, there's this blind seer cliche, like the blind person who can see the future. But nowadays, if a child's born blind and claims to have visions of the future, they're going to get medicated.
Yeah.
So what's happening is we're all kind of plagued, blessed and cursed with what we consider to be problems. And maybe one of the only reasons, I don't know, that we consider them to be problems is because they differentiate us from other people. But that's in fact what we're kind of here to do is find out what does differentiate us from other people, because we all are a part of this collective, but at the same time, we all have some unique thing. And, God forbid you end up treating your unique thing as something that needs to be, medicated.
That's a good point. Yeah, it's how we look at those aspects of our personality, to see them as the possible strength or what makes us who we are and why we're here.
Yeah, we spoke about this a little bit earlier about how we live in a social world, and I made a good point, because points just come to you sometimes, and they're not really my points, but you understand.
Yeah.
That socializing might be like a secondary aspect. Of course, I'm a little biased because like I'm a masculine male or whatever. This is also something we spoke about, but it seems that men are being pulled into the social world like just being dragged, and it's looking as though we don't fit so deeply embedded within the social world. If you look at someone like Mark Zuckerberg or Bill Gates or anybody who might be a part of the Illuminati or whatever, it's not like they spend a lot of their time just like going out and being accepted by people. It's actually quite the opposite. They really stick to their sacrifice. They stick to what they're doing. And maybe we spend too much time around other people, or maybe we spend too much focus on other people so that we kind of neglect what would make us successful if we dared to nurture that thing by ourselves.
I'm sure. There's something about socializing and being with other people, because I noticed, in times I've spent on my own, when I then meet people and maybe talk about some of those things, it's interesting. Often the person I'm speaking to will have gone through a similar thing or reached certain conclusions, or just by talking to them, you're reflecting and you're getting the bounce back from life or from them, that something is kind of nurtured or seen there, like kind of what we talked about earlier, that thing about articulation. Just by talking about something and getting out in the open, instead of just running it through your mind, which you can be down spirals, but by talking about it, getting out in the open, telling someone and having them hear it, and then maybe and they can either say, "Oh no, you're crazy, man. Why are you thinking about that all that time?" Or they kind of confirm that they know what you're talking about and it makes sense.
Social validation is definitely embedded in us, and that could also be kind of like a part of our animal nature, because all animals seek, they seek affection from their partners and seek affection from their families.
But I think we can need it too much. It's almost like a crutch. I think part of this whole validation, like on social media and the whole selfie thing, do I look like, do I look attractive to you and all this kind of thing, I think it could be used too much.
Yeah. Our reach, our accessibility to other people has extended so far that we're asking for validation from people who have never met us and don't give a shit about us.
Yeah.
And it's like a 50-50 whether they like us or not, but we're judging it as if it's important.
Yeah.
It's like we're rolling the dice, and I can see, with a gambling metaphor, I can see that it becomes addicting.
Yeah. Yeah, that is one of the ills, the whole online social media side of things.
Yeah, and there's no kind of suppressing and there's no demonizing our need for emotional validation or for social validation, but maybe we might not be asking for too much, but we might be asking the wrong crowd. I think this has to do with, I'm not very close with my family. They don't quite understand, or at least I perceive them to not quite understand. And I think this is something we all can relate with, because these past generations have gotten so far from living naturally that they've kind of lost touch with the journey to living naturally. So now we're kind of we want the social validation from other people, but when you're not when you're meeting people who there isn't enough natural chemistry with, and you can't open yourself enough to get validation about the things that so deeply need validation, you're going to be settling for validation about shallow things. And that's fine because it works, but it's much more temporary and surface-based.
Yeah.
So it's almost like we're plagued to go back to living at our edge. We have to live at our edge. We can't keep up friendships that don't meet our deepest levels or whatever, or we can only keep them up to a certain extent, or we risk suffering. So it's not about what we want. It's not that I want to talk about something deeper. It's that like my soul or what have you begs to be heard.
Yeah, I wonder if some people look for that validation like on social media where they think that they've chosen their friends through a criteria, I guess, and so they feel like the validation is more important than their families who they haven't chosen, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, the criteria is if we've both read the Harry Potter series.
Yeah, but sometimes it can be deeper because there can be people that you share the same interests, or like in videos such as yourself, by people that meet on that platform. There is something deeper there from that in that search, by meeting people that are kind of searching in the same way, or there's a resonance there.
We all have to feel comfortable enough to say what's on our minds. And it's not that other people judging us like physically prevents us from saying what's on our minds, but other people judging us makes us not want to bother saying what's on our minds. Because what's cool about gathering a community, right? Because my YouTube channel is not quite about me. It's like about just a human journey or whatever, but hopefully. But what's cool about the people who gather is just that we're all comfortable to say stupid things. Like I have this one guy who just posts really dumb things in the comments on my videos. And it's not that like we're addicted to talking about serious subjects, but we're just open. We can joke if we want. We can talk about serious stuff if we want. We're just free. And it's kind of this freedom that you award to other people. And I suppose that's what you're looking for too. You're looking for people who allow you to be free with them, but that also requires that you, especially let's say in romantic endeavors, that requires that you kind of set the tone of freedom. Sometimes we decide if we are going to feel free and if the other person is going to feel free. It's not always that other people need to help us feel free.
Yes. Yes. I mean,
when you behave a certain way, then you subconsciously give other people the option to also behave that way. And this is how role models work. When a kid sees a rapper get a tattoo on his face, now the kid is like, oh, we can do that? I didn't know I could behave in that way.
Yeah. This goes back to a little bit of social engineering sometimes, I think. And where we've been so atomized in some ways, like with families, for example, that we don't have that more immediate role model sometimes.
Yeah, kids are killing themselves, young kids.
Yeah.
I actually watched Caitlin Nicole Davis. She was this 12-year-old girl in Georgia. She just killed herself last year, 2016, around Christmas, so just a year ago. And she live streamed because she was into live streaming a lot and she had an audience. She live streamed her suicide. And it's really touching because, I don't know, it represents like something that's so wrong that children who haven't even given like puberty a chance.
Yeah.
Who haven't even, they haven't even explored much, but so far they've just been like demonized so much or whatever it is. All they've seen is such poor, her family was poor and they were like pieces of shit. And it's like, I don't know what exactly I'm getting at, but it's kind of like up to all of us to live at our edge, or we're kind of plaguing everybody else with
I think you just touched on a lot of what I want to cover on this podcast is maybe that we're all looking to get better, but these factors such as social media, what young children have to be put through, and the effects on them are a big cause of where we got to. So yeah, you're right to kind of take a collective responsibility and individual, because the only control we have is what we do and what we improve in our lives.
Yeah, it's tough when our culture is so washed out. The closest thing children get to understanding who they are is like some poor ideology that's some thousands of year old like patriarchal view of things, and the world simply doesn't work in the way that religions say. So and this is kind of that positive thinking bullshit that's perpetuated. When you don't have, the thing is, it's not that ideologies don't work. It's that they don't work for everybody. So some people really are satisfied just preaching Jesus, because for some reason the stories of Jesus, they are able to relate enough with the Bible to kind of view the world in that frame. But what happens when you don't have a choice about which frame you look at the world through, and the one that you're born in doesn't capture your essence enough, then you're going to be experiencing dissonance, but you have to have the courage and the freedom to break out of it.
And the awareness to be able to know that there is something different.
Absolutely. And if you grow up in a home that kind of just sticks to one thing, or if your parents are sticklers about doing this, then your journey is just a little bit harder, I suppose.
Or then you can have the other way where there isn't such a framework, and then you're not driven to dive into things 100%. Or
absolutely
explore, you can realize that you can drift a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, drifting and wasting time, that's just as, that's the tricky bit.
I think we're all kind of on a similar journey. I think actually the only people who aren't concerned with what we're talking about, and I think this kind of goes for every subject, I suppose, is either people who have surpassed this level that we're at, or people who haven't gotten to this level yet.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it's weird. You just start making videos on YouTube talking about whatever. I didn't plan on what I was going to talk about. And then you just kind of draw people who are like you because you don't have any other option. It's not like people who hate you are going to watch you, just sometimes.
Or just to wind you up.
Yeah, that happens.
That's kind of what you're taught in radio, actually, like if you're doing a music show or whatever, is to play the music you like and talk about what you like, because if you play up to what you think people want to hear, then there's a dissonance. Not that it's helped me so much, because I play the music I like, and I'm not sure how many people listen, but yeah, it can be a double-edged sword sometimes.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
But you have drawn people to you. I've found you, and it's wonderful to have met you and finally spoken to you.
The pleasure's mine, man. This was great.
Yeah, I'm glad you liked it. I wasn't sure how it would work out. I just knew it'd be great to get in touch when you first mentioned the idea, like, of your website and connecting on Skype. I just assumed that you were developing an idea to kind of help people in some way like that. But as you say, it doesn't have to be defined, but just be sitting there and hearing people's story, but then being able to relate what you know about it with what you learned. That helps anyway. Yeah,
I'm sure that the more you push with something, the details will sort themselves out. How exactly you're going to do this, or what exactly you're going to talk about, or something like that.
Yeah, because I prepared some, but not a lot, really. With our conversation, I wanted to talk about where I was in my life. I didn't talk about too many details, but only just by sharing the things that are on your mind and troubling you. That's enough, and then things unfold from there. Yeah. It worked great. It worked great this time. That's for sure.